small change in an environment in a past can actually drastically alter the future on a complex, nuanced level. That could actually change who you are completely as a person you are today, and all the opportunities that have happened for you, all the amazing things you have in your life now. You can't change the past, and everything that you did do unfolded for you, and you could not have done it in any other way.
Welcome back to another episode of Keys to the Queendom. I am Tamara Maya, and with the help of my incredible guests, I'm on a mission to lift the curtains on all the secret tips, tools, and strategies I wish I had known while building my first business. So if you are ready to unlock your full potential, welcome to the Queendom.
All right, welcome back, everyone. We are actually live here on the Gold Coast with the amazing Nikki Cassa. Keys to the Queendom welcomes you, my queen, mind-body practitioner, speaker. You've got your own podcast as well, and you have an upcoming book coming over too. How are you, gorgeous girl?
I am so good. Thank you so much for having me. My love, my bestie. So good to be here with you.
I haven't seen you since you've moved up here. How's it been transitioning?
Yeah, Gold Coast has been amazing. Yeah. I am really settling in quite well. Community here is great. Opportunities, everything. It's so great. Loving the lifestyle as well, and so nice to just be on the beach as well. It reminds me of Adelaide, which is where I grew up, and the beaches there, you can walk from one end to the other, as opposed to Sydney, where it's like, yeah, it's a bit bombarded, and you got to get back on the cliffs and stuff, and it's just different. So it's a little bit slower here and a lot more wholesome. So I personally love it.
Honestly, I was we haven't spoken much about this, but just reflecting, where you and I both were, and just even yourself, my love. Like, did you think you would be here where you are right now, knowing, our years of fitness coaching, WBFF Bikini Pros? We're going to touch back on that as well, by the way. Yeah, did you see all of this coming to fruition?
I was talking to my clients this week about my journey, and I was saying to them that once upon a time I thought I was going to be world champion WBFF, and it's interesting how that's evolved and changed, but I knew that whatever I was going to do, that it was going to be something that was impactfully driven. I think that's something that I've had from a really young age. It's like a combination of competitiveness, ambition driven. Like, I like to dream big, and I think from a really young age, I wanted to be a ballerina, and then I wanted to travel across the world, and then into fitness and become world champion, and now it looks as big, but just in a really different way and a lot more closer to my heart. So I think if you'd asked me back then if I'd be doing something big, I'd say yes. If you'd asked me if I'd be doing this with you right now, I would have been like, really? No.
Come on now, hey.
Yeah, so times have changed, that's for sure.
And when do you feel, because I think it's important for those listening right now, we've all gone through different phases of our lives, right, Nikki? We've gone from becoming, thinking we were going to be a fitness coach and transitioning to where we are now. Like, what was your moment when you knew you weren't in alignment with wanting to become a world champion?
Yeah, so I, just for context, because there might be a few people listening who are like, who is this Nikki girl? And might be the first time you've heard of me, and I want to give a bit of background if that's okay. So
absolutely,
we can take them on that journey with us.
Let's go from the beginning, actually.
So I originally grew up in Adelaide, and it was 2018 where I decided that I wanted to dive deeper into my fitness, and at the time, clinging onto fitness was actually a really good outlet for me. I was going through a bit of a dark phase of healing, and it gave me a lot of purpose. It gave me direction and something that I could use as a medium to really channel meaning into my life again. And particularly, when you're struggling with mental health, it's like important to have that, whether it's in the form of a hobby or what you do for your career. And so being a hobby, bodybuilding was something that I actually became quite obsessed with. And it actually really helped me get through a really dark time in my life. And I'm super grateful for bodybuilding. I wouldn't go back and change that part of my life, because it taught me so much. And bodybuilding was really what opened me up to personal development.
Yeah.
It's what really got me into mindset and what allowed me to really appreciate the inner workings of our mind, our bodies, our souls, our spirit, all of that. And I'm so grateful for that journey. But through being in the bodybuilding industry and not having any work on myself internally, what happened was that it quickly became from obsession to like a lot of self-punishment. I was filming a podcast, not a podcast, I was filming a module for my clients today, and I was sharing with them this journey, and I said to them, you know, it's super important for me to be transparent and be vulnerable about my journey through bodybuilding, because from an outside perspective, people clap for you, and people say things like, you're killing it, you're doing so well, like, oh my God, I want to be you, your hashtag goals. And the reality is, for me, for majority of my competitions, I was binge eating, I was doing excessive forms of damage control, which essentially means, you know, if you overeat one night, the next day you punish yourself with exercise, or you severely undereat. And I was doing that a good 3 weeks up until my pro show. Right, so I'm getting on stage as a professional athlete, and yes, it is a bodybuilding show, so you're judged on your criteria of how you look predominantly, but the pillars of a high-performing athlete, which is what a lot of people like to tell themselves that they are, you look at the definition of like athleticism, it's not just about physically how healthy you are, but what about mentally, emotionally, and even from a physical perspective, like your hormones and things like that. And I wasn't healthy, certainly not mentally, but even on a physical, emotional level too. And so, you know, competing on stage as a pro and coming third in Australia, I just felt something about it just felt like I just didn't deserve it. And something about it felt really out of integrity. And coming out of that show and competing for that, I went down a even further destructive pathway. So a lot of like body dysmorphia and distorted eating, and I realized through that it's time to kind of look inwards. After 5 shows, it starts to take its toll on you. So I dove into all my inner work, and I started with therapy, and it wasn't quite for me. I wanted more practical tools and a more deeper spiritual way of looking at myself. And that's where it all started to evolve, and I started to learn more about neuroscience and psychology, and realized that that's what I wanted to teach other people.
Yeah. I resonate a lot with that too, because obviously with the background of dancing and competitive nature too, and just going through that phase as well, I felt that for fitness for me, and going through competitions with you as well, Nikki, you know, we loved being on stage and we loved inspiring other people. And so do you feel you still inspired people the right way when you were a fitness pro?
Yeah, for sure. You know, like when I first started getting into fitness, I looked up to women like Hattie Boydell and Rachel Dillon, and without having role models like that inspire me to go into my fitness journey, like I mentioned, I probably wouldn't have found the work that I'm doing now that's so impactfully driven. So I think that there's like a dark and light side to everything. For me, my personal experience was really dark. But I think for a lot of people from the outside, they would have taken a lot of inspiration from that. You know, seeing someone who's dedicated, disciplined to their goals, shows up, has a strong mindset, they are competitive, they're educating you on nutrition and training. Of course, I think there's a lot that people can learn from that about how to take care of themselves and be more strong and more fit. And for me as well, again, that was what allowed me to start my journey of self-improvement. And for me, it started physically, and then I went obviously internally. And I think for some women that is their journey too, and that's so okay, because everyone's on a really different journey. And I really like to look at bodybuilding as not the problem, because it's just like anything. It's like saying that our bodies are the problem. And it's like, well, our bodies are just a a tool and an object. It's a vessel that we live within. It's not good or bad. It just is. And we get to decide the meaning that we associate with that thing. You know, and for me, I still don't look at bodybuilding as bad.
Yeah.
What I was able to do through my healing was recognize that bodybuilding triggered a lot of wounds that were already there within the first place. So a lot of perfectionism, a lot of distorted relationship with my body and food. And when I look back, a lot of that actually started similar to you with dancing when I was a lot younger. So bodybuilding is often not the problem, but what it can do is trigger a lot of inner wounds, and particularly if there's like a predisposition of childhood wounding or trauma.
Yeah. And I found very similar to you, Nikki, those triggers came quite a lot when I started competing as well. And moving more into the healing phase as well, I found like it didn't feel right for me at the moment, you know, to do the shows, especially during COVID. That's where a lot of the healing, I guess myself and you did as well. I remember you would help me with posing when we're still not sure whether the show was going on, and then you would even say and ask me questions, and we would have moments of like, is this what it's meant to be right now? And where I'm coming back to this right now is I found, and maybe anyone who's listening can relate, that for a moment I felt that the physical aspect of competing brought confidence within myself. But what I really learned from removing myself from being, or the title of being a WBFF pro, it was like, who do I need to be now? Who's Tamara? And I feel like people are now navigating through this in life, in anything right now, where, thank you, Apple, it's finding out who we need to be. And for you, when you sort of, I wouldn't want to say walk away from competing, but when you sort of felt it was not the time for you to continue that journey, you know, who did you feel like you needed to become?
Interesting question. So when we look at this idea of like becoming our truest self, or looking at who we have become, one of the very common ways that people tend to look at like becoming a new self is that like there's something in them that is inadequate and they need to change. And this creates and emphasizes more of the problem. So I want to just explain this a little bit and take everyone on a bit of a journey to really help people understand like why this is a really important part of self-development and healing. So I'm going to use my example to really highlight what happens when we're looking at like the evolution of change. So when I competed, a part of me used bodybuilding as a form of external validation to tell me who I was, right? Now, a lot of people don't just do this in bodybuilding. We might do it in work. So, for example, we look at like our title, or we look at the money that we earn, or the type of success that we have, and that might reaffirm how important or who we are in, you know, a certain industry or things like that. And so this can also happen in relationships. So I seek certain forms of connection and relationships so that men can reaffirm my deservingness, or my worthiness, or my ability to be loved. So when we look at that, what's happening is that there's a need to seek validation and acceptance externally, and it's often because there's a lack of that happening internally, right? And so for me, what happened, and I didn't know it at the time, was that I was looking for the next shiny thing, and I was looking for people to clap for me, to hide the fact that internally I didn't like the version that I was. But instead of going into my self-development and then going, well, I need to create a different version of me, the one that is more worthy of acceptance, well, then I just create a new identity, right? And that can be helpful if we're looking at like values and attributes and things like that. But when we're looking at the core healing that we really want, it's not about creating more conditions and labels for who we need to be. It's actually about undoing and removing and letting go of the labels that we created along the way that were never us to begin with.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of women, the ones that we create are things like, well, I'm not good enough, right? The I am is the identity. I am not good enough. I am not worthy. I am not pretty. I'm not smart, strong, lean enough. And the list goes on. And so what we really need to do here when we look at, you know, creating a new version of ourselves, or stepping into our higher self, or creating a new identity, really check in with yourself and go, like, underneath all of this stuff that I'm trying to create more of, I really need to be coming back to the truth of who I really am. underneath all of this stuff, underneath all of the labels. It's like, what is this internal essence that is me?
Yeah.
Not the title, not the job, not the body, not the money, not the success, like none of the things that are outside of you. It's coming back to the internal truth of who you actually are.
Yeah. I got shit. I don't know if anyone else is getting shivers right now, but I just got shivers from hearing that because, yeah, I felt there was a part of me that didn't know who I was, and that was almost all I was. And unlearning and relearning who I was, you know, here to really become, who is Tamara or who is Nikki or whoever puts these identities and sort of labels on us. And those were tough times, and I know for you, it's just a testament to everything that you've been able to create now. Like, I'm very grateful to have you in my life. And I was actually thinking that moment when we were on a boat where we made that video.
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah, I do have it.
I'm sharing it now because it's just something that I think is really important. We made a video together, and God, it was basically like what we want to achieve for 2023. Do you remember what you said?
Yeah, we were pretty much just like yelling into this camera how much we love each other, and we were talking to our future version self as like, Nikki, this time in next year, or and then in 5 years' time you're going to be watching it and you're going to be doing this and transforming women's lives like that. And yeah, that was really special. And I think, like, here's the thing when it comes to inner work and growth is that you can have aspirations to grow and improve and evolve. I think that what we're not trying to say here is that you just accept yourself as you are right now, and then you never have any ambitions to grow and evolve as a person. But I definitely know that if it comes from a place of punishment and always betterment, because there's a part of you that's not good enough, then it starts to become like that form of damage control. Well, whereas it's done from a place of like acceptance and love, then it comes a lot more in alignment with our heart and our values, as opposed to externally driven motivators.
And let's talk about acceptance and love, because I think that's going to be something that a lot of the women listening would love to understand or navigate. What would be, I don't want to say the first step to learning how to love or learning how to, you know, receive self-acceptance. But if you were to give one first piece for someone who is really ready to, you know, emerge into their new version of themselves, how would they begin?
Yeah, good question. So you know how when you hear like these self-help gurus say like, love yourself, you just need to love yourself.
Motherfuckers.
Like, I love the positivity, but we really got to understand what that really means. There is a culture in self-development that pushes a just do it approach. Like, just do it, just love yourself, just show up. And it's really important to understand that not everyone has the ability to just do that. You know, people go through all sorts of different stages of healing. A lot of women and men, but, you know, we're here talking about women, are stuck in pathways of survival. And when you're in a state of survival, thriving is not the most important thing for you to feel safe. It's really hard to thrive in a condition and an environment where you're just trying to like get by and survive, like day to day. And like, that's super important to recognize first, is giving yourself compassion. If right now when I say to you, just love yourself, you're like,
but how? Yeah.
Like, that feels like something that is just not possible for me. And just starting with a bit of compassion there and acceptance is like super, super important. Because again, if what we're trying to look at here is loving yourself because you're like, I fucking hate myself, it's only coming from a place that's fueled by hatred, right? So that's a really good piece to start with first. It's like the how is really different for everyone, and that journey can take years. It's not going to be a 12-week program that you do where you change your life. They will teach you so many tools, and being in a container with a mentor will really elevate the way you think and feel about yourself, for sure. But the integration of that can take a lot of time. I mean, you understand, Tamara and I have been through this journey for years. And so I think giving yourself a lot of grace and patience through that is important too. So one thing that I think we can really talk about that would be helpful for women to understand is actually this model I like to teach my clients, which is called parts integration.
It sounds sexy already.
Like, I want to integrate all my parts.
Touch me now. Sorry, guys. Nikki's caressing her boobs. Yeah, please go on.
Internal parts, guys. We mean internal.
Internal.
Okay, so internal parts. So this comes from a neuroscience model, and it's actually called, the official name, internal family systems. So IFS is a framework that we use in a neuropsych space to help people understand the shadow parts of themselves.
Yeah.
Right? So this would be best described as if someone were to say something like, you know, a part of me is really excited, but a part of me is also really nervous.
Yeah.
Right? You said that to me before we
Yeah,
jumped on the
it was nervous and excitement.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so what we're really starting to understand in this language is that there's not just you as this one personality, there's actually a whole family of sub-personalities. And so these sub-personalities are called parts, and they make up these different parts of you.
Yeah.
And so as we start to look at this and the inner workings of our psyche, we can really start to understand, like, wow, I have this part of me that's really great at showing up and being an absolute hustler in business. And then there's another part of me that sometimes when it comes to, let's say, jumping on a podcast or being a public speaker or meeting new people, she gets a little bit nervous or shy. And by doing that, what we can understand is there's going to be parts of you when it comes to self-love that are so good at it. They're like your higher self parts, your self-energy lover parts, and they just love you wholeheartedly. But then there is other parts that really struggle with that. And it's often because these parts of you have learned that in order to keep you safe, that there were other things that were more important than self-love for your survival. So here's a really good example. If you grew up in a household where your parents put a lot of pressure on you to do super well, maybe you noticed that you only got your parents' attention when you were excelling in school. Maybe you noticed that your dad never said he loved you or he wasn't proud of you. Then what would happen is this part of you from a very young age would create the association that your love didn't come from who you were. Your love came from your success, how hard you're working at school, and your performance essentially, right? So you no longer were loved just for who you were loved for how well you performed. So this part of you has created this association. No, you can't just love yourself. You have to perform for that girl. You have to work really hard for that girl. And so this is where when we look at like the saying of like, just love yourself, we're really invalidating these different parts of us whose experience of that is very different. Yeah. And without understanding these inner workings of our psyche and looking at these dark, disintegrated parts, and I say dark, disintegrated because a lot of us don't love these parts of us. We're like, just fucking like do it, or just love yourself. Yeah. Or like, why was I like that? Or why couldn't I just love myself more? We don't give them that kind of love.
So it's about having compassion for those parts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so by doing that and creating that relationship with these parts, what happens is we can integrate them as part of us and begin to create this really healthy relationship so that your parts of you that are really good at loving yourself can reparent these younger parts, can have a really loving, autonomous relationship with these parts that kind of struggle to do that. And so instead of them feeling unsafe with this whole love yourself thing, because they never got that love growing up, well, they can start to really surrender to the higher self, the more mature, integrated parts of our psyche, and really trust that, like, Nikki's got my back. She knows how to fucking love me. She's got my highest good in her mind. She keeps us safe. Like, we trust her. And that's how you can build this more like confidence, self-love, self-acceptance, and really trust as well that our nervous system and our bodies are working together to take care of themselves.
Hey guys, real quick. Have you ever been stressed out or stuck on a problem you just can't seem to figure out, and then a friend or a mentor comes along with like a fresh perspective and shows you a solution that completely changes the game for you? I'm smiling right now as I say this because I know I've had a ton of these moments while building my businesses and remembering back to all the people I have been helped by, which gets me so excited. So I want to pass on the information here and give you guys a favor.
to build this Queendom community. You know, whatever platform you are listening on, I encourage you to hit that subscribe button and tune in every Wednesday, because you just never know when you'll hear that special something that completely changes the game for you. And when it happens, make sure you leave behind 5 stars so we know our efforts are making an impact. I love you guys. Let's get back into it. And if you were to integrate using your language, or even bring this more in a daily practice for someone who is new, what would you give them as tools, or even just being able to see themselves going into like an old pattern of thinking to come back to that, oh, I'm Nikki, or I'm Tamara, I'm loving myself in this moment in all parts?
Yeah, great question. So one of the practices that I love to get my clients to do, that's a very unconventional self-love practice, is mirror work. Now, when we look at self-love practices, there are so many really easy tools and probably quite simple ones that we all know work really well. You have like your journaling, meditation, affirmations, breath work, cacao ceremonies, reframing negative stories. There is so much work we can do. But mirror work is quite an unconventional one that I don't see very often. That's actually really beneficial when we look at self-love. So if we're looking at integrating these parts and loving ourselves more, in order to do that, we have to love these parts of ourselves. And I don't just mean, you know, the inner child that you look back and you're like, oh, my poor inner child didn't get love. No, I mean the parts of you that you look back at and you're like, oh my God, like I'm so ashamed of, you know, my 16-year-old self that got drunk every weekend and made poor life choices. Or, oh my God, my 21-year-old self that, you know, did a 7-day bender and took, you know, so much cocaine her nose was bleeding. Like, I mean, crazy stuff where you look back, you look at your past self and you either judge, you criticize, you feel embarrassed, ashamed, resentment, and anger. And this is super important because a lot of people look at their past selves and these parts and they go, but it's in the past. But the thing is, when you look back at that, how does it make you feel? And if that's changing how you feel in the moment, those parts are still there, hanging out in your subconscious, dormant, still punishing you for things that happened 5-10 years ago that aren't relevant for you now and aren't serving you. You know the saying, if you can't handle me at your worst, you sure as hell don't deserve me at your best.
Yep.
That's what these parts essentially create the relationship with yourself. And so if there's these parts of you that you're essentially resenting and hating, how are you going to radically love yourself? It's like these parts of you can't even love and accept, right? It's like having a relationship with someone. You're like, oh, I hate this about you, but it's okay because I love these other things. Like, no, you got to love them for everything.
Yeah.
You love them wholeheartedly. It's unconditional love. The conditions aren't, oh, but it's okay because there's a few things I love about you. It's like, no, I love you wholeheartedly, unconditionally, right? So I invite everyone to go back and think of these parts and these versions of yourself through high school, through primary school, through your young adolescence, and go, are there some parts of me that I still hold a lot of shame and guilt towards in my past? And there's some really important things to recognize here. Number one, these parts of you at that age did the very best with the knowledge that they had at that time. And that's so important because we often look back and we're like, oh, I wish I, done something differently. I wish I'd made a different choice, or I should have, shouldn't have drank so much alcohol. I should have done this. And the thing is, like, yeah, from the lens of your higher self now and your much more mature, sophisticated self, you can look back with a higher level of executive functioning and decipher choices that are in alignment with your values now as a 20, 30-year-old. But do you think you had that level of maturity and sophistication at 18, 16, 15, 12? Of course not. And so we're creating this really like unfair, unrealistic expectation upon our younger selves to have known how to make better choices when that was actually the best choice that they could make at that time. They couldn't make any other decision, right?
Yeah. And
so the saying, like, everything happens for a reason. Everything does unfold for you, not to you. It unfolds for you. And there's this term in, I think, psychology, I think it is, called the butterfly effect, or it's off some movie.
Yeah, Ashton Kutcher.
Yeah. So the model essentially, it's not a movie, right?
Yeah.
So the model essentially means that like a small change in an environment in a past can actually drastically alter the future on a complex, nuanced level. So if you go back and you do change something in your past because you wish and you should have and this and that could actually change who you are completely as a person you are today, and all the opportunities that have happened for you, all the amazing things you have in your life now. And so like going back, it's like you can't change the past, and everything that you did do unfolded for you, and you could not have done it in any other way.
Yeah.
And so what that starts to allow us to do is look back and go, oh my God, you know, that 18-year-old me that was partying every weekend, oh, like poor Nikki, like she deserves so much love. She was just doing the best with what she knew at the time.
Yeah.
And she deserves forgiveness. She deserves love again, especially because of all that pain she was experiencing. It's time to forgive her instead of punishing her and feeling embarrassed by her. She did the best with what she knew. So you're probably thinking like, well, where does this whole mirror thing come in? So once you've been able to do that part, what you then do is you sit down in front of a mirror. And I'm going to see if I can get really descriptive here because there's probably people just listening.
I'm going to close my eyes for this.
Yeah, close your eyes, everyone.
Get into the zone.
Just close your eyes, Tam.
Yes, I'm there.
And imagine yourself sitting on the ground, legs crossed in front of a mirror, and you shuffle up to the mirror as close as you can, almost as if your knees were going to touch. And you sit there and you just start by looking at yourself. Brownie points if you can do this naked. Yeah, Tamara's body language there just
Completely
went,
laughed.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, we'll talk more about that.
We'll have to
chat. So you're sitting there naked if you can, fully clothed is fine as well if that feels more comfortable. And you want to start by just looking at your body, just appreciating how you look, your shoulders, your tummy, your legs. And then you slowly want to bring your awareness back up to your eyes until you find one eye, and you're just going to stare into that eye in the mirror and hold that gaze. Now, as you hold that gaze, you're going to start to notice that there will be some things that will come up for you. Initially, you're probably going to feel very uncomfortable. You might want to laugh or giggle. It might feel silly. You might be like, what the hell is Nikki making me do? She's such a weirdo. That's fine too. Just let it all come up as you're sitting there and looking into your eye. And slowly, as you start to surrender and just allow yourself to sit there, you'll start to notice that there will be some emotion that will come up for you. It might be love, it might be sadness, it might be shame, grief, anger, frustration. And what you want to do in that moment, which is what a lot of us don't do very well, is not run away from it. Right? Not use external things to mask it. Bodies, success, money,
alcohol,
drugs, men, women, porn, other forms of addiction, right? So we want to sit with that and really ask yourself, like, it's just me in the mirror. I'm safe. What am I running away from? And you'll find what will happen is a lot of these parts that haven't had an opportunity to hold space will start to show you how they're really feeling. And in that moment, they're getting what they didn't get when they were younger, right? The opportunity to be seen without judgment, heard without advice, loved without conditions. And it is the most freeing, beautiful thing ever. So any emotion that comes up, allow it to come up. If you want to laugh or cry, get angry, frown, whatever it is. And then once you feel that that emotion has come to the surface, you gently close your eyes and then send love to that part. Allow it to be loved, especially things like anger and hatred. We were made to feel that those were bad things to feel. You can't, hate's such a strong thing. Yeah. You can't feel that. Anger, don't be angry, right? Good big girls don't cry. What? I cry all the time. It's so normal.
And coming back to that process was beautiful. I started doing it and I was like, I really want to do this properly with or without you, Nikki. That was amazing. But you said something about self-acceptance when it comes to forgiveness. When did you forgive yourself?
Yeah, so self-forgiveness has been a long journey for me.
Yeah.
I first did a lot of self-forgiveness back in 2017 before I moved to Sydney, before I went into bodybuilding, after a huge traumatic experience. And I had to look at my circle of friends. I had to look at my life choices. I was drinking every weekend. And I was like, who am I? I didn't recognize myself anymore. So that was my first encounter with self-forgiveness. The next one was after I quit bodybuilding. And it wasn't until about 14 months after quitting where I got to the pit of my depression. And I was like, I need to figure out what's going on. Therapy's not working. And I did like a heart opening ceremony and realized how my self-love was tied to my appearances, and again had that part of me die. It was like from death comes rebirth. That was another big breakthrough with my self-forgiveness. And since then it has actually just been a lot of small steps of self-forgiveness. I think that self-forgiveness can't be forced. Like, you can't force forgiveness. And I think sometimes we feel that it needs to be this one thing we do, or a burning ceremony, and it just happens overnight. It might not just be one personal development event that you've fully forgiven yourself for. It might be an ongoing process of integrating that and reminding yourself of your truth and coming back to everything that you're not, so you can remind yourself of why you deserve to love and forgive yourself.
Yeah. Forgiveness has been a huge theme for a lot of my clients as of late, and it's beautiful to hear you share that, because again, it just goes to show the level of depth you have, the level of care, and also you would have experienced people that have done you wrong with the traumas you've gone through as well. How did you find forgiving them?
How did I go forgiving people from my past?
Yeah.
So one thing that gave me a lot of comfort was knowing that people don't do things just because they're like bad people.
Yeah.
Like, hurt people. And that took me a while to kind of understand. I held a lot of anger and resentment to past abusers, particularly from when I was sexually assaulted as a child. And that was a really confusing time for me. Like, I didn't understand why it had happened and what was going on until I was an adult. So I really had to go quite far back to figure out how I was feeling to then forgive someone like that, right? And so what gave me a lot of comfort was knowing that it's often the people who have the most wounding and the most trauma that hurt people.
Yeah.
And sometimes because of what they learned from either their parents or maybe their abusers as well. You know, when we're born into this world, not to get too woo-woo and spiritual, but we're born into this world perfect, sentient beings. Whole, complete and perfect. And along the way, we learn somewhere that we're not good enough, that our pain needs to be externalized, that hurting other people makes us feel better. And it's not the truth. And some people come to that realization and learn that in their spiritual journey, and other people don't. And there's, in the midst of hurt people, like healed people heal people too. And so as I give my past abusers forgiveness, it actually heals that part within them, because now they have one less person in the world sending them hatred or resentment or anger or blame or guilt or suffering. And that's important, because a lot of people are very good at externalizing all of their emotions that they don't want to feel, pushing it onto other people.
Yeah.
And when we start to look inwards at our own healing, you know, the saying, like, you got to be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah.
Like, if we want a world with more love, we have to start loving each other, even the people in our past who, although their behavior we wouldn't condemn and say was okay, but we forgive them for that, knowing that they probably experienced something similar or something even more traumatic on a level that created that version of them.
Going back to compassion and love. Yeah.
Yeah, always.
And because we're all about healing, what would be the thing that you feel this year you're on a journey right now that you're healing through, that you feel comfortable sharing with the audience? We're always healing, right?
My healing this year is into, and this is going to sound a bit paradoxical, but my fear of fear.
Please explain.
Oh, gosh. Okay. So I'm on this big journey this year. I'm like going quite deep into my healing this year on a very spiritual level, looking at my fear of fear, because fear is just an illusion. Like, fear is not real.
The compass.
When we look at physical fear, is it scary to like jump off a building? Sure. With, looking at bungee jumping, sure. But if we look at something like a psychological fear, like for example, a fear of
spiders.
No, psychological would be more like a fear of public speaking, a fear of meeting someone new, a fear of commitment, right? A lot of people fear getting in a relationship and having to commit to someone. Like, what? And everyone here wants love and connection. So for me, it's looking at my fear of fear. And a lot of the fear I have is not being in control and surrendering to an outside force where I'm not able to hold on to control. And in the past for me, that was extremely scary, where I thought I would actually lose my life. Yeah. So I'm not quite sure where that path is going to take me just yet. I am very fascinated in different forms of healing modalities, not just from the psychotherapy point of view, but other things. But yeah, this fear is an illusion. It's often all in our heads and not real, and we create these stories about it. For example, for me, last year I had this huge fear of public speaking I had to start working through. And when I looked at it, it wasn't public speaking that I was scared of. It was the fear of being judged and not being good enough. And the only person that created that was me. Like, I decided I wasn't good enough. I decided that there was something imperfect about me that people would judge. No one told me that.
And you would never think it at all.
You wouldn't think
Not at all, that was a fear of yours.
And that's the thing.
Isn't that interesting?
So from an outside perspective, it might not seem like that, but internally I created this story about something that I needed to be scared of, and then I was scared of that.
Yeah.
So fear is an illusion. Psychologically, it's not real. It's something that we create. And that's where like that integration work is really helpful, because when I was looking at healing that part of me, I realized that it came from a part of me when I was in school. And I got up in front of the English class and was delivering this oral speech. And I did it perfectly. And I sat down, and the teacher, I was like class pet, right? The teacher gave me this massive appraisal. And then the girl behind me, she like tapped on my shoulder and she was like, wow, what a tryhard. And her, boyfriend, which, in year 6, who has boyfriends anyways, they were like laughing at me. And my whole pit of my stomach just like fell onto the ground. Yeah. And I remember after that, I never did English orals. I never wanted to get up in front of the class and speak. And so I tied it back to this memory, and I held on to this story that I created about maybe this girl that was maybe jealous, or she was intimidated by my ability to just be myself and share my voice. And I really had to make peace with that part of me. Like, Nikki, you did not need to minimize your voice. You did not need to silence yourself or dim your light. It was just this story that you created, and you changed yourself because that's what you thought you needed to do to be more accepted, right? Hide in the shadow and don't put yourself out there too much, because people could dim your light. And the thing is, like, no one dimmed my light. I was the one that dimmed that light within me. And so reclaiming that power came from going back and realizing the story that I created about that and about myself, and undoing that and reclaiming my power.
So we're near at the end of the episode. I know I don't want it to end either. And I love you guys so much for tuning in every week and coming to this journey with me. But the good news is it doesn't have to end here. If you've gotten value from today, I have something really special I want to share with you. Now, most people are very dedicated to learning from podcasts or books, but when it comes to taking the action required to make these ambitions come true, they retreat back to their comfort zone and listen to another podcast. But I know that there is a small group of queens listening right now that are hungry for more. You want complete freedom over how you spend your time and money, and you want to be able to do it from anywhere in the world. I understand you. I was you. And now I have complete freedom over my time, location, and money. And I did it all with my social media blueprint. And if you are part of the group that takes action towards your dream life, I have included an exclusive link for you to jump on board below at 50% off. I appreciate you queens all so much. Now let's finish this one with a bang.
And what did that look like? Did you get back into public speaking? Have you, been putting yourself out there in that?
Yeah, so I did a panel discussion last year for a women's empowerment brunch.
I saw that actually. In Sydney, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I spoke at Morgan's event and shared more about my story and my journey. And then that's been it for now. But this year, depending on when you're listening to this, 2023, I'm going to be hosting my first in-person event. So I'm really looking forward to that. And it certainly feels like a calling for me. If you'd asked me if I had done, I would do that 3 years ago, I would have just ran away from the conversation and completely just disregarded that as a goal.
Yeah.
So even just talking about that is so exciting, because once upon a time, I couldn't imagine that I would be able to share my voice and really be a thought leader in this space for other women.
And I think the biggest thing as well is you're sharing the fears that you had, and the fact that you're also embracing it now and doing things that are stretching yourself. And it's inspiring for listeners and for myself, because I definitely want to be there to support you above all, because you've always been such a huge inspiration in my life. Now, Nikki, the last thing I really want to end, and it's been amazing to have you on this show, is if you were to give, the keys to the queendom to the listeners, the key to whatever it is that they need or want or choose advice, what would that be? What would that key give them?
The key. I want to give them a whole treasure chest of keys. Can I?
You can do whatever you want.
The first thing that just came to mind was stillness is the key. That's so funny.
That's beautiful.
Stillness is actually a very underrated skill for people to develop. And I think the fastest gateway for people to begin their mental, emotional, spiritual, professional development and growth. When we look at stillness, which feels like counterproductive to growth and expansion, right? Slowing down. What happens is that we open this inner reservoir of power. And a lot of people, if we look at this, remember our external world, people looking externally to find what makes them special and amazing and good enough. It's not external, it's within you, right? Everything you're seeking is internal. It's right here in your heart. And in order to find that, you have to look inwards. But when we're in a really busy, driven society, a lot of us don't take time to slow down. And I don't mean rest. I mean be still, where you're not listening to a podcast, Tam's podcast.
Except for this one.
And taking time to be with yourself rather than just constantly doing all the time. Taking time to be with yourself. I love this hashtag busy girl life. However, it doesn't make for a very good ability to look inward. So we need time to balance all of this external output and start bringing that energy back inward. Stillness really is the key. And by doing that, you can begin to unlock your inner power and allow these parts of you to shine, to integrate them, give them love, and really just transform who you are and come back to who you've always been.
That was amazing.
honestly, thank you so much for being here in person, my love. Honestly, we have absolutely loved this. And if you could let everyone know where they can find you and more about you, this is your plug.
Yeah, so come check me out on Instagram, Nikki Cassa, NIKKICASSA.
And that is it. Thank you so much, my love. We've got lunch, dinner soon. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And this is Keys to the Queendom. Tamara Maya here. We are out.